Good, good. How's it going? Tell me all about this project.
Yeah,
So,
okay. So basically, for school, we have a citizenship campaign for this year. It's due at the end of this year. And we decided we were going to look into fake news and how to like spread awareness about it because we think it's like a very current issue that people tend to overlook. So yeah, that's basically where we got the idea from and where to start.
exciting. Sounds good. And how are you guys going to present your project? Is it in written form? Is it like a video? What is it like?
Oh. Oh,
Can you hear
so
me?
basically we've got like we have to do like an action, but our teacher said that it'd be good if our team did a few different kinds of actions. So we've got videos, workshops, and leaflets, things like that, just anything that we can use to spread awareness. So it comes in different forms.
Fun. Sounds exciting. Yeah, I'm happy to do this. Brilliant.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking your time to, all right. So the first thing we just wanted to ask you was, could you start by introducing yourself and telling us a bit about what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Aria. I'm
Mhm.
actually a producer at Sky News. So I work mainly on
Right.
TV packages. So that basically involves making a 3 to 4 minute summary of a story, where we'll summarize the story, we'll have interviews in it, we'll have the most impactful pictures. And it's just a way for the audiences, people that watch Sky News to tune in and find out what the story is. And I mostly focus on foreign news. So specifically over the last few days the ceasefire deal that we're getting in Israel and Gaza. So I've been focusing on that. And that means, making sure that we have that kind of balanced story where we're telling the perspective of the Gazan people who are being bombed, on a daily basis. And, the stories of families who have hostages in Gaza and how anxious they are about them coming home. What's going on in the US, like the wider picture, what's going on in the UK. So it's basically looking at the wider picture of a story and being able to tell it in a few minutes, in a way that's clear and concise to an
Mhm.
audience.
All right. Okay.
What would you say the biggest challenge is for journalists that they face in combating fake news today?
I think a lot of our news that we get is basically we have to like either go out and look for it. So we
Oh.
go and interview people, or we have to, trust, what kind of news that we're hearing on the ground. So for example, if I'm in England, it's hard for me to tell what's happening in I don't know, let's say in France. It's a bit more difficult. So you should always, the only way you can get a story is if your boots are on the ground. However, that's not always accessible. And sometimes you're going to have to trust your sources. And if you're trying to battle fake news, you're going to have to cultivate all these sorts of strong relationships with these sources to make sure that, they're feeding you the right information. And if they're not, you run the risk of, running a story that's fake news. So one thing that we do, for example, at Sky is make sure that everything that we put out is verified by at least two sources. And those are two verifiable sources, so that we can say, you know what, we've done our due diligence, we've done, our effort to try and, make sure that there's nothing dodgy going on here. But of course, you can't always do that. It's always or people will lie, and there'll be unfortunate circumstances where, these kind of cracks will slip in through we'll have things, stories slipping through the net. And then we're in that situation where we might end up publishing something that's,
Yeah.
not fully untrue, but there might be a bigger story to tell. So as
Mhm.
journalists, we need to always make sure we've done our due process, our research. We need to make sure we've spoken to the right people, all to make sure that we're protected.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
focus, do you focus more on do you get primary news more or secondary news? Secondary.
Um, at Sky, we always seek to do primary news. So we always, as an organization, try to look for primary news and sorry, excuse me, go out on the ground and find our own news. And that means talking to people, interviewing them, and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to broader global issues, so for example, if it's a US story and this is the US government telling us this is our perspective, then at that source, at that point, we're able to say, do you know what? This is the president of the United States and he's saying this, then that means there must be a degree, of truth to it. However, we always attribute it. We'll never say that this is the full truth. We'll say this is what the US president says is the truth. So
Right.
if it comes to using secondary sources, we'll never say this is the truth, period. Any secondary source that we use, we will say this is what this person says. And
Okay.
then we try and verify those claims independently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is your company wary of fake news, and how do they work to identify and address it?
Absolutely, absolutely. You have to. I mean, we always try to look for media literacy kind of awareness, so providing tools that to fact check things. We have OSINT team, so that's an open source technology team, which so for example, I'll give you the best example of, how we use the OSINT team. If there is an airstrike in Ukraine from Russia, what we do is we don't just say there's been an airstrike. We have to find exactly where that airstrike is. So our OSINT team, which is very difficult, as you can imagine, they'll pinpoint and geolocate the exact area of where these airstrikes happen. They'll look at pictures of before and after. So all these kind of tools that we use, we'll be able to see if these actual things happen. We'll use heat maps after an airstrike, for example. A heat map will show that the area is now red because there's a lot of heat in that area. Compared to yesterday, for example, where it'll be blue or green or something. So there'll be a lot of things that we'll use to make sure that we're battling that kind
Really
of
deep diving into the details of
Oh,
everything.
100%. We have to. We owe it to our audiences. I mean, this is not just Sky News. All, major news organizations will be able to look into using technology, to using AI, to using, all these kind of tools to help fact check and verify information.
Have you ever been forced to write about something that you
No.
disagreed with? And how did that experience affect
No.
you? No, you haven't.
So I'll be completely honest. I like to think I'm a fairly principled person. I've never been asked to write something I disagree with. And if I ever was, I have the option to just say, do you know what? I'm not comfortable working on this story and walking away from it completely. I have been in a position where my work has been changed.
Oh, okay.
I have written something and someone else has changed it, but never something that my name has been attributed to it. So if there was a story where my name would be on the headline, I would get the final say if I wanted my name on it. And if I didn't feel comfortable with it, I could take off my name from it.
Oh, okay. But then all that work you wouldn't get the credit for?
Yes, but you have to remember that I don't work for myself. I'm not an independent journalist. I work for an organization. And if credit isn't such as an important thing to myself as much as, getting a story out is.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What are your primary sources and how do you ensure they are reliable?
Okay, primary sources for us would be going out on the ground, so filming, asking people, interviewing them. So for example, I recently worked on the LA fires and I sent off a team to go and do interviews with people who are affected by the fire. So for example, we would directly go to the homes of people and interview them. And then it's real because they're there, that's their home, it's burnt down. So you can see for your own eyes. A lot of it is journalists using that kind of, reasoning, logic, looking around and seeing, do you know what? This is this person's house, it's burned down. I can tell that. So now I'm going to interview them. So that would be one source of it, going out, boots on the ground, and doing that. Other than that is, like I said, those tools of us looking into like Google like I said, the heat maps we use like Google Earth, Google Maps, all that kind of stuff to geolocate particular areas. So it's a lot of that. A lot of technology involved as well, but the biggest and most important primary source I would say by far is being there in person. You can't hear what's on the ground unless you're on the ground, right?
Yeah.
So there's Sky News always seeks to send people out to listen to what's going on. For example, the ceasefire negotiations, we had one of our chief presenters being inside the room when the Qatari PM was giving a press conference. And I think that's important. It's all well and good having a camera there, but having a journalist there hearing all these things is very important so that they can feed back and tell us what's going on.
How do you verify the accuracy of your sources' information?
So like I said earlier, we use multiple credible sources. We'd use kind of reliable fact-checking organizations. I think a lot of it is also being skeptical to begin with. So I think you need to, as a journalist, you always need to think, is
Okay.
this
You
true?
just have to look at
You know,
the
is
other
it
side.
too
Yeah,
good
for
to
sure.
be true? If you have that kind of mindset to begin with, then you're already like halfway there because you're already, questioning something in front of you. And if you're questioning it, your first step is like, okay, how do I verify
Mhm.
this? So if you're, skeptical of sensational kind of headlines, sensational claims, then, that can help you fact check to begin with. And I think also, we avoid spreading unverified content to begin with. So unless it's been verified, I'll give you an example as well. For example, the the Reform Party, Nigel Farage's party,
Mhm, yeah.
recently had some resignations. They had 12 resignations. We could only verify one, but the Daily Mail and the Guardian went with 12. Until we were able to verify them, we weren't able to run the story.
Okay.
So even though it means being a little bit later, and other organizations will break the information before you, it means you just wait and you verify through your organization at least twice through two credible sources, and then you're able to run it. Another way, for example, if it's a resignation, we could just call the person up and be like, "Hello, have you resigned?"
Yeah.
And if they're happy to tell you, then for sure that you can run that story. But until we were able to get in contact with them or the Reform organization, their press office, and ask, has this person resigned? We can't really, run that story because it's really dangerous. It's and also we're Ofcom regulated. That's another thing I don't know if your campaign will talk about, but we there's a regulator for TV specifically called
Yeah.
Ofcom. We need to make sure we meet those standards of due impartiality to make sure that we're being impartial and we're not providing fake news, that we're providing safe information. Like, for example, Sky News would never offer medical information on air because that's very dangerous unless it's from a doctor. So
Right.
all these kind of things, we need to make sure that Ofcom regulations are met, and that's part of the whole process as well.
Yeah. And it does help that Sky News has like a good reputation then. So then people, if they want like reliable news instead of going to like how you said, The Guardian, how they had like 12 um
Mm.
resignations, they'd more believe Sky News over
I would
The
hope
Guardian.
so, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie to you girls. We get it wrong sometimes too. We're not
Mhm.
perfect.
Right.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I think as an organization, we do acknowledge when we're wrong. Um, and you have to go there and you have to like bring those things up. Like, for example, when something is wrong at work, it's okay to go up to your bosses and say, you know what, we did this wrong or we got this wrong, so that we can fix it for next time, so that we don't run the same thing again, so that if we did make this mistake next time, we know to verify it again. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
everything has a process before it goes on air. There's we have two desks where those things must go on, through, they must approve it before I am allowed to put it on the TV. And sometimes if it's, I'll give you another example. When it's like really gruesome pictures, like dead bodies of girls and kids, for example, I'm not allowed to put that on air before I ask, someone senior, are you okay with this being on air?
Mm.
Just because it just gives me that protection to say I've asked someone else.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that something's been watched by someone else's second opinion. And I don't think a lot of, careers, a second opinion is, oh, why should I have to ask somebody, why should I ask someone else for help? But in journalism, I think a second opinion is always needed. And
Yeah.
that's half of the, you're halfway through fixing the fake news problem if you have somebody who's equally as skeptical as you looking at that as well with fresh, clean eyes.
Yes, yeah. So it's not just your opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. How has the rise of fake news impacted public trust in journalism?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think we lived in a very polarized society, so I think people are very divided in very extreme sides. So it's okay to be divided in opinions, but I think we're seeing the rise of like really extreme, like far left and really extreme far right, and that's never a good thing. Extreme of anything, in my opinion, is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Having moderation in everything, I think is the best way to be, but it's caused hate for sure. It's eroded trust in media and institutions. So people don't trust, um, kind of organizations that before were very trustworthy. They don't trust the media as much. And it affects, you might not think this, but it affects everything. It affects health. For example, the COVID kind of stuff related to COVID and misinformation. That affects people's health because people are like, I'm not going to get a vaccine because it's, they're going to inject 5G into
Yeah,
me. They're
yeah,
going
yeah.
to, I
That one,
mean,
yeah.
it sounds crazy to us, right? But people genuinely believe that, and then they don't get a vaccine, and then they do, get sick, and then there's nothing you can do about it. So, fake news has such huge impacts, like during pandemics, and like that kind of misinformation can be dangerous physically as well. And then you've got like it disrupts elections, the whole kind of fake news narratives and stuff, like Brexit, again, another example. On the side of a bus, the Leave campaign had 350 million pounds goes to the EU that could have gone to the NHS. And that's, it doesn't, it's misleading,
Yeah.
basically. That kind of figure is misleading. It doesn't account for, the money that the EU brings, and it fuels public opinion, and it fuels the public, the Brexit debate.
Yeah.
So it's like all these kind of things are super dangerous. Another one, no-go zone for Muslims. This is something that's like crazy. I mean, this applies to us all here. There was a claim that there was no-go zones in like parts of Birmingham and whatnot. And then this kind of stuff, it fuels Islamophobic, sentiments. And then when it fuels, when we have, and then that, it's not just one thing. When you're Islamophobic and like these kind of sentiments, you post it on Twitter, you post it on TikTok or whatever apps you post it on, other people read that, it snowballs, and it becomes from a tiny little comment about no-go zone to a massive thing like the riots that we had last year, where people were like looking for Muslims to fight.
Yeah.
Which is insane. So like all these kind of things, you have to be so careful because all these little claims that are made, whether it's on TV, on news, or on social media, they snowball and they escalate in a huge way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe that journalists have a responsibility to educate the public about fake news?
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, for me, I'm very worried about the rise of AI, and how it will affect the kind of news that we see. However, I do think that the public are smarter than, we give them credit for. And I think, and I would hope that they trust the voices of people on the ground, like journalists that are there physically in person, rather than, a machine.
Of course,
So I think, sorry?
No, go on.
So I do think it's definitely our job to educate people. But also I think we always need to do better as organizations to become accessible for people, to provide that news that, people can understand easily as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yes.
What strategies or tools do you use to identify fake news stories?
That's a good question. Like I said, so to verify them or to identify it. What was your question? Sorry?
To identify them.
Yeah, so I think fake news has some signs that you can tell usually.
Yeah.
So for example, it'd be on like websites which don't have any other like kind of articles. Sometimes you'll click on an article on Twitter, for example, and it'll just be that one article, and that website is like a dead website, if that makes sense. And so it won't have a credible kind of news source. It will have like a sensationalist headlines, like for example, Muslims are coming to your towns to do this and this and this. So it's like a threatening or sensationalist headline, very scary, it's designed to like get people angry. So it'll be exaggerated to a certain extent. It won't have a credible source, so it'll say all these things are happening, but it won't say where it came from. And that's always a bad thing. So, for example, like I said earlier, if we say something is said by the president, Joe Biden, we would say it came from the president, Joe Biden. We won't just put a quote there. We have to say where the quote came from. We have to attribute it to somebody. But these kind of like, if you have fake news, they might have a lack of a credible source, or like they won't cite where they got their information from. This is, I guess, a bit of a silly one, but it happens. They'll have poor grammar or spelling, because
Yeah.
it will be someone who, again, like after I write an article or after I put something on air, somebody will check that to check, they'll sub-edit it. So they'll check if that's, got the right grammar, the right, spelling, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, if someone's just one person and they're spreading fake news, they don't have that kind of fact-checking thing. Strong bias as well is a huge thing, another sign of fake news. Um, for me at least, again, like I said, for Sky News, we're under Ofcom regulations, so we have to have certain kind of impartiality kind of rules when we put something out on it. But if an article or if a TV program or a social media video has strong bias or one side reporting, I think as you should always look at it and be like, oh, why is there one side bias? Why don't they have the other side?
Mm.
Do they not have a regulator they're being regulated with? And if they don't have a regulator, then it means that they could spread fake news if they
Yeah.
wanted to. And probably also lastly, I guess, unverified claims without evidence. If you have, lots of claims that, an organization is making or an article is making, and there's literally no proof for it, no pictures, no videos, no witnesses, eyewitnesses, then you know that there's probably something dodgy going
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you share an example where fake news caused significant
Yeah, I
harm
mean,
or
I gave the
confusion?
examples of the no-go zones, the
Yeah.
NHS kind of COVID rollout, the Brexit. So all these are really good examples, I think, of these kind of things. But um, another example is, I guess, during election time. Another thing is people will be like, the Labour Party are going to ban this, the Labour Party are going to ban that, the Conservative Party believe in this, the Conservative Party believe in that. They'll use examples like, for example, this is going to sound awful, but grooming gangs, that's on the news right now. They'll be like, the Labour Party are pro grooming gangs, or someone else might say the Conservative Party does nothing about grooming gangs, they're pro it as well. So a lot of people spread news like that, and then especially on social media, and a lot of people won't read anything beyond that. They'll just be like, oh my God, it must be true. The Labour, especially if it's in a pretty graphic or something, they'll be like, it must be true. So they'll share it with their friends. They'll be like, how disgusting is this? And that affects people's mindset about how they vote, right? And they won't be able to make an informed decision as such. Or another example, in Gaza, we see a lot of videos, or Lebanon, actually. Let me give the example of Lebanon. There was loads of airstrikes by Israel in Lebanon. But I remember seeing a particular video that was AI that was shared of an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon, but it was fake. And I
Mm.
remember it looked awful and it was so scary. And I remember this being shared, and I was like to my friends that were sharing this, I was like, this is fake, this is AI. And do you know what? We have real pictures of airstrikes by Israel in Lebanon. So you don't need to make, like, people
Yeah.
don't need to make fake ones. And when you make fake ones, people are like, oh, look, this is a fake AI one. So all of them must be fake AI. So it makes it dilutes the story, and it makes it look like we're lying about the fact that there's airstrikes in Lebanon, as if it
Yeah.
never happened, because the
Yeah.
ones that
Yeah.
we see are fake ones. So you have to be really careful, because when you have fake news, it makes the real story weaker. Or another thing, let's say in a terrorist attack, 100 people die. If somebody says actually 1,000 people died, people are going to be like, do you know what? That's not logically possible. So maybe 0 people died and the whole
Yeah.
story is made up. And that's super dangerous, because what about those actual 100 people that died? So you have to think about all those things, and the dangers of fake news, about and how it dilutes a story, and how it basically turns a story into nothing, even though there is an actual thing there. It should be enough, or even like on October 7th, it should be enough to say that what happened there was awful. Innocent people, hostages were dragged into Gaza. I think everybody can agree that was awful. But then you don't have to make up a story about 40 beheaded babies put in ovens, because the story of what happened is, awful enough as it is. And when you tell that, a lot of people will be like, oh, maybe then nothing happened at all.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I've never thought of it like that, but no. Yeah.
Do you think stricter regulations should be imposed on platforms that allows like the spread of fake news?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The problem is, though, that a lot of these platforms are American or Chinese. So the UK don't, I mean, from a UK perspective, we don't put a lot of regulations on them. But for example, Meta, who own Facebook and Instagram, or now X as well with Elon Musk, I absolutely think they should be regulated. I think it's so dangerous that Elon Musk, for example, has is able to tweet something and basically change the whole news cycle and make up lies. Again, for example, he accused Keir Starmer of enabling grooming in the UK. It's completely false. And the fact that he could do that and accuse, the Prime Minister of a country and thousands and actually millions of people seeing that is very dangerous. There is a fine line between free speech, which I'm very for, and spreading fake news. And I think that's so dangerous. And I think the world's richest man, for example, should definitely know that. And he does, and he, go on purpose, doesn't, like to listen to that. Meta, for example, this might be worth putting in your campaign as well. So Mark Zuckerberg used to have everything on Facebook verified. So there used to be claims under, like, if you posted something on Facebook, there used to be something underneath that would say, oh, this is true or untrue. However, now that's been taken away, and now it will be people that will be writing that. So it won't be actual fact checkers. It will be regular people like you and me who can fact check those. But we're also biased in our own ways. So it's quite dangerous as well, for that too. So I think there should absolutely be regulations. I think the governments should step up, and they are doing in some ways, like TikTok, for example, in the US. I don't know if you know this, but TikTok tomorrow may be banned in the US.
Yeah.
Is
But
that fake news as
but
well? I don't know. Is that true?
it's it's going to be true, but Donald Trump's going to come in on Monday and he'll probably allow it back in. So it's a way of Donald Trump saying, "Look, guys, I'm going to save TikTok, and everybody's going to be so happy."
Oh my God. Okay.
But yeah, they will ban TikTok because TikTok is owned by someone who is Singaporean. However, they all have links to the Chinese Communist Party. And that's also incredibly dangerous in some ways, because of propaganda. And I don't know if you guys seen this new app, Red Note. Well,
Yeah.
it's not a new thing, but I mean, like, people are directly talking to like people in China and stuff,
Yeah.
which for globalization is good, but not for spying. When you
Yeah.
have spies telling kids, your government is really, really bad and
Yeah.
causing problems here. So, there's good and bad, I guess, in everything. But yeah, I do think there should definitely be regulation. Sorry, that was a really long
No, it's okay.
No, that's all right. Final question. What advice would you give to young people about distinguishing between real and fake news?
Look at everything with a skeptical mind. See, look, the thing is, we're very lucky in some ways that we live in a society where everything is recorded. It's obviously dangerous and scary, but you can see everything with your own eyes. Now, with the rise of AI, I worry too, because, AI can make very, legit looking videos, like I said, with the Lebanon airstrike. So it looks real, but it's still fake. But I would say try and verify everything before you share it. Read it a few times, maybe look out and be like, what does this look okay to me? Are they giving proof of where these quotes came from? Are they giving proof of where, all these claims came from? Do we have pictures? Do we have videos? Do we have, eyewitnesses on the ground from people? Unfortunately, I think it's going to get even harder. And I think it's going to be more difficult to identify fake news as AI gets better and better. And over the last year, AI has gone from being so terrible to so good. And yeah, it's a very scary world, but do your best to try and sift through that information. And I don't blame anyone for spreading fake news, actually, unless they do it on purpose. But what I mean is, if somebody does it and they didn't know, it's hard to blame them now given how widespread it is.
Yeah.
And I think tell your friends if you know it's fake news. Don't be like, oh, but it could be true. You know, if somebody tells you it's fake news, it's probably fake news, so you can, delete that and tell your friends to delete it too. Yeah, so that's the only advice I would give. And yeah, just be careful. Just be careful because it's dangerous for everybody involved, really.
Yeah.
That's my
Nice.
advice.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you so
so
much.
much.
Thank you.